That year, we decided to spend a vacation at the seaside. The long-awaited summer promised to be hot and carefree. My wife, Elena, my wife and I and our two children went to the resort to enjoy the sun, sea, and time together. Our children, 10-year-old Anya and 8-year-old Nikita, were looking forward to beach games and swimming in the sea. We booked a cozy hotel room right on the beach so that we could wake up to the sound of the waves every morning. Everything started off perfectly. We woke up early, had breakfast at a cafe on the beach, and spent the day sunbathing and swimming. The kids built sandcastles and searched for seashells. Elena looked happy and relaxed. We laughed and goofed around, enjoying every moment. I felt that our marriage, despite the years that had passed, was still strong, and these days together only strengthened our feelings. One day, when I went to the water slides with the kids, Elena stayed on the beach. She decided to rest and sunbathe in silence. When I returned a couple hours later, I noticed that she was having a fun conversation with a young lifeguard who was on duty on the beach. He was tall, tanned, and looked like the hero of a romantic movie. They were laughing and talking animatedly about something. I didn't pay much attention to it, thinking that Elena had just made a new acquaintance on the beach. The next day, Elena, despite my warnings, decided to go swimming in the sea. The excitement in the water was strong and I was worried, but she assured me she could handle it. I stayed on the shore watching her. She was swimming confidently, but suddenly a powerful wave came over her, and I saw her start to sink. My heart sank. I screamed, trying to get the attention of the lifeguards, but luckily, the very same lifeguard was already rushing towards her. He deftly dove into the water, and after a few moments pulled her to the surface. Elena looked exhausted and frightened. The lifeguard gently lifted her into his arms and carried her to the rescue station. I was greatly relieved, but realized she needed help. Wasting no time, I ran to the nearest pharmacy to get some medicine to prevent possible hypothermia. The pharmacy was about a kilometer from the beach, and the trip took me about an hour. Every minute felt like an eternity, and the thought of how Elena was doing kept me awake. When I finally got back, all I wanted to do was make sure she was okay. As I opened the door of the rescue station, I saw a picture that pierced through me. Elena and the lifeguard were lying next to each other. He was holding her hand carefully, his face expressing genuine concern. They were talking quietly about something, and there was a tenderness in their gazes that I hadn't seen in our relationship in a long time. My heart clenched with pain and jealousy. I stood in the doorway, unable to make a move, watching them. Thoughts were running through my mind. Is it really not a coincidence? Are they really close? Every moment of their interaction felt like a betrayal to me. Elena looked up and saw me. Her face changed. She tried to pull out of the rescuer's embrace, but he gripped her hand even tighter, continuing to whisper something in her ear. I found the gesture offensive. A fire of rage and resentment flared inside me. As I stepped closer, I glanced at the lifeguard, who didn't seem intent on letting Elena go. His confidence and calmness irritated me even more. Elena finally broke free and stood up, looking at me with guilt and concern. She tried to explain the situation, but I couldn't hear her words anymore. All I could see was their closeness, which sent me into a storm of emotions. The lifeguard stood up and suggested that I calm down, but that only made me angrier. I felt myself losing control of myself. In that moment, I realized that the trust that had been the foundation of our relationship had been shaken. Doubt and jealousy filled my soul, and I realized that our life would never be the same again. There was a heavy silence. Elena didn't know what to say. Her eyes filled with tears. She tried to explain herself, but I couldn't hear her words. My insides were churning, and I left the room so I wouldn't say too much. I walked out onto the beach, which now seemed empty and cold despite the warm evening. We talked in the morning. Elena admitted that she was really into the lifeguard. She explained that it was a passing fancy, that while she had almost drowned in it, her adrenaline had kicked in. And then suddenly she was saved by a muscular lifeguard, that she had acted on instincts and emotions, and that she regretted it very much. I listened to her, but I had a hard time accepting what she said. How could she do that? After all, we had a family, children, shared years together. The conversation was long and painful. Elena denied everything at first, saying that nothing serious had happened between them, that it was just a momentary weakness caused by stress. But I saw her eyes, full of guilt and fear. We sat across from each other, and I felt an invisible wall growing between us. I asked her bluntly, "Why did you do it? What did I do wrong?" She answered in a shaky voice, "I don't know. I just wanted to feel alive, needed. You've been so distant lately." Her words cut to the core. I remembered all those moments when we were making plans for the future together, raising children, supporting each other. And now all of that was in jeopardy. We decided that we would try to save our marriage for the sake of the children. The children were ours in common, and we couldn't afford to have their world destroyed because of our problems. But the trust was broken, and every day reminded me of her cheating. Every move she made, every look she gave me suspicion. I began to notice little things I hadn't noticed before. If she was late for work, I immediately thought the worst. If she laughed on the phone, I tried to eavesdrop on the conversation. Vacation, which was supposed to be a time of joy and relaxation, turned into a source of pain and frustration. We could no longer enjoy the simple things. Instead, we felt tension and awkwardness. Every conversation we had turned into an argument. Every gesture was viewed with suspicion. We returned home, and I felt even more lost. Elena tried to mend the relationship. She became more attentive, tried to spend more time with her family, cooked dinners that we ate in silence, filled with unexpressed feelings. She tried to talk to me, asking about my affairs, but I couldn't forget her betrayal. In every word she said, I heard echoes of that night on the beach. We went to a marriage counselor, tried to talk frankly. In the psychologist's office, we revealed our feelings, tried to understand what went wrong. I heard Elena talking about her loneliness, how she felt forgotten and unwanted. I talked about my feelings too, about how I tried to be a good husband and father but ended up losing her trust. But there was still a gulf between us. We became like two strangers living under the same roof. Our children noticed this tension and tried to bring us closer, but their efforts were in vain. I tried for their sake, but every time I looked at Elena, I remembered her with that lifeguard. Elena had suggested going on vacation to get my mind off things and try to start over, but I couldn't imagine a vacation knowing she was with someone else. We tried to have romantic dinners, went to movies, but it was like an artificial attempt to revive something that had long since died. The nights were the hardest. I lay next to her, listening to her breathing and thinking about how things could have been different. Her touch no longer brought comfort. It reminded me of her betrayal. I often got up in the middle of the night and went into the living room to sit in the dark and think about what we should do next. Our friends and family noticed the changes too. They asked questions, but we answered evasively, not wanting to bring our problems into the public eye. We tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy for the sake of the children, but deep down I knew our marriage was beyond saving. Every day became a struggle for survival. We lived in the same house, but we were so far apart. Elena kept trying to fix our relationship, but I couldn't trust her anymore. I realized that it would be better for both of us if we separated, but the fear of the unknown held me back. Several months went by like that. We continued to live in a state of constant tension, and I became more and more convinced that our marriage was doomed. Finally, one evening, after another pointless argument, I realized I couldn't live like this anymore. I packed my things and left for a few days with a friend to consider my next steps. 6 months passed, and the pain, which at first seemed unbearable, slowly began to fade. Our relationship began to change for the better. I noticed how Elena was trying to do her best to rebuild the trust that had been lost. She was more attentive and caring, often talking to me about her feelings and trying to rebuild what had once been broken. I, in turn, tried to forgive her, although it was not easy. We went to couples counseling, and it helped us to open our hearts to each other, to realize that we were still important to each other. After another 6 months, our relationship became even warmer. I began to forget about the incident that almost destroyed our family. We started laughing together again, enjoying time with each other. Our children saw the changes and were happy that their parents were happy again. They felt that the atmosphere in the house became more harmonious and calm. Elena suggested that we go on vacation to celebrate the new stage in our lives. We chose a place we had never been before to create new memories unburdened by the past. This vacation was a turning point for us. We rediscovered each other, saw in each other the qualities that had once attracted us. We talked a lot, shared our dreams and plans for the future. It was the first time in a long time that I felt we were becoming a team again. After another year, as our relationship grew stronger, we decided to have a third child. This decision was a conscious and desired one. We realized that we were ready for this new stage in our lives. Elena's pregnancy went smoothly, and every day we rejoiced in the expectation of our baby. Our older children were looking forward to having a new sibling, and this brought us all even closer together. When our third child was born, it was the culmination of our journey together. We felt that all the hardships and trials we had endured were not in vain. We became stronger, wiser, and closer to each other. We learned to forgive and trust again. We healed like nothing ever happened. Everything that happened passed like a bad dream. Time helped heal the wounds, and we were able to get back to normal. Elena became for me again the woman I trusted and loved. Our children saw how we coped and were proud of us. Now when we look back, we realize that this difficult period was a test that we successfully passed. It taught us a lot and made our family stronger. We live with the confidence that we can overcome any obstacle because we are together. Our common efforts, support, and love helped us to endure and find happiness. Life is back on track, and we embrace each new day with gratitude. We know that we still have many challenges ahead of us, but now we are confident that we can cope with them together. Our family has become stronger and more united, and that is the most important thing. Story 2. I have always considered myself a kind person, but that day it was as if another personality came into me, evil, cruel, and hateful. It started like this. We lived in a small cozy house on the outskirts of the city, and I did everything possible to provide my wife Olga and daughter Paulina a happy and peaceful life. We had been married for 15 years, and I believed that our marriage was strong and reliable. Every day I looked forward to coming home to my loved ones. I worked as a construction worker and my job was physically demanding, but I always found time and energy to give my attention to my family. I often organized family weekends, cooked dinners, and even learned how to braid my daughter Paulina's pigtails when Olga was busy. All neighbors and friends considered us a model family, and I was proud of it. One evening, coming home from work earlier than usual, I noticed that Olga was agitated and obviously nervous. Her gaze was unfocused and her smile was strained, as if she was trying to hide something important. Usually she greeted me happily, hugging me and telling me about her day, but this time was different. She quickly retreated to the bathroom as soon as I entered the house and locked herself in there for a few minutes, which wasn't like her at all. I decided not to ask too many questions, writing her behavior off as tiredness and assuming she'd had a hard day at work. But that night I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Thoughts of her strange behavior kept me awake, and I tossed and turned in bed for a long time, trying to figure out what could have set her off. A few days passed, and the strange behavior of Olga began to recur with frightening regularity. She went out more and more often to meet her friends, which had been rare before, and returned home late at night, sometimes even past midnight. Her explanations sounded convincing, but there was an uncertainty in her voice that alarmed me. She was staying longer than usual at work, citing urgent projects and additional responsibilities, though she had always tried to get home as soon as possible to spend time with her family. Even more disturbing was her attitude towards the telephone. Olga checked it constantly, even when we were together, and often muted it, which she had never done before. At times she would become anxious and avoid my gaze, as if she was afraid I would notice or ask something. At night she would often wake up and go out on the balcony to talk on the phone, explaining that she didn't want to wake me up, but I couldn't help but notice that her conversations were quiet and tense. I tried to convince myself that it was all my imagination and suspicions, but it was getting harder every day. Every action she took, every word she said added fuel to the fire of my suspicions, and I began to feel an unbridgeable chasm growing between us. One evening, when I returned from work, I saw that Olga had left her phone on the kitchen table and had gone to take a shower. Suddenly the phone rang. I happened to see the name Andre on the screen. It was the name of her coworker, whom she often mentioned in conversations. My heart beat faster. I tried not to panic and rationalize what was happening, but my intuition told me something was wrong. I picked up my phone and saw the message, "I can't wait to see you tonight. You are my only joy." My head rang in my head and my eyes swam in front of me. With each word, I felt my world crumbling. I read the message several times, not believing my eyes. I had a terrible suspicion inside of me. This message was like a stab to the heart. I couldn't believe that the woman I had lived with for 15 years could betray me so meanly. Unable to control my emotions, I started searching Olga's phone for other messages and photos. My hands were shaking and my heart was beating so hard I could hear it pounding in my ears. Each tap on the screen was painful, but I couldn't stop. I found correspondence that clearly indicated that there was more than just friendship between Olga and Andre. There were messages with declarations of love, arrangements to meet, and even photos of them in intimate settings. In one of the photos they were holding hands, in another they were kissing. It was all too blatant to ignore. Sitting in the kitchen, I felt my heart shatter into 1,000 shards. Images of our life passed before me. How we met, how we got married, how we raised our daughter Paulina together. Memories of happy moments now seemed like a mockery. I remembered all those moments we spent together with Olga, all our plans for the future and dreams that now seemed empty and meaningless. We had dreamed of traveling to Europe, of having a second child, of spending our old age together. Now it all seemed like an unfulfilled mirage. Every message, every photograph, was proof that our marriage, which I thought was strong and secure, was a lie. I reread them over and over again, trying to find some excuse, but I found nothing but pain and disappointment. I could feel the emptiness growing inside me. It was like falling into an abyss from which there was no escape. At some point I couldn't stand it and closed my eyes, hoping that it was all just a nightmare from which I was about to wake up. But reality was relentless. I knew that I now had a choice to make. Either try to save our marriage despite the betrayal, or cut all ties and start a new life. But at that moment, I was too shattered to think about the future. I just sat in the kitchen, feeling my heart being torn apart, and didn't know how to go on living. When Olga came out of the bathroom, she immediately realized that something was wrong. I was sitting in the kitchen with her phone in my hands, and my eyes were full of pain and anger. She tried to say something, to justify herself, but the words stuck in her throat. She realized that all was revealed and her secret was no longer a secret. Barely holding back tears, I stood up and walked out of the house. I needed time to comprehend everything that had happened. I could not stay close to Olga, knowing about her betrayal. Wandering the streets of the city, I tried to find an answer to one question. Why? Why did she do this to me? Why betray my trust and love? I didn't know what would happen next. My world was turned upside down and I felt lost and alone. But one thing I knew for sure. I had to do something to regain my sense of dignity and justice. My inner world was shattered. I could no longer bear the pain of betrayal that was eating away at my soul every minute. Determination and rage possessed me, and I firmly decided that I had to meet Andre and demand an explanation. I felt it was my only chance to regain my dignity. I knew where Andre's office was. The next day I went there. As soon as I saw Andre leaving the building, my anger burst out. I went up to him and, without saying a word, punched him in the face. The blow was so hard that Andre fell to the ground. I screamed, spewing out all my pain and hatred that had accumulated over the past few days. Passing people stopped. Some of them tried to separate us, but I was relentless. I struck again and again, ignoring the screams and attempts to stop me. At that moment, my rage completely consumed me. I could think of nothing else but betrayal and my ruined life. The police quickly arrived at the scene of the fight. They broke up the fight and arrested me for assault. I was taken to the police station where I spent several hours waiting for a decision on my fate. The police officers, seeing my condition, tried to calm me down, but I was inconsolable. A hurricane of emotions was raging inside me. Soon the trial took place, where I was found guilty of assault. The judge, taking into account my condition and circumstances, commuted the sentence, but I still had to serve my time in prison. It was another blow to me. I couldn't believe that my life had fallen apart so quickly and irrevocably. While I was in prison, Olga started a new life with Andre. They moved in together and started living together as if nothing had happened. Olga seemed to have no feelings of guilt or regret. She went on with her life, leaving me alone with my pain and loneliness. I want to apologize right away for any errors in the text or dubbing. I am just learning, and the language of this channel is not my mother tongue. The dubbing is done with the help of artificial intelligence. Please point out errors so I can fix them and improve the quality of the content. Also, I will be glad if you share your thoughts on the topic. Your support in the comments is very motivating for me to keep looking for new, interesting stories. Thank you for your understanding and participation. Subscribe to the channel and put a bell to not miss new stories.